Okay, let's unpack this. Think about those times, as a safety professional when you get that new chemical on site.
Yeah.
And you're looking at this dense safety data sheet, feeling like you need another degree just to figure it out, right? And your job is making sure everyone goes home safe.
Exactly. Or maybe you're wading through OSHA rules, make sure everything's compliant, and more importantly, actually safe.
That's where we come in today.
Right. This deep dive, which is brought to you by Safety One Source, is really built for you, the safety professionals, the risk managers, anyone out there really dedicated to making workplaces safer. We've taken a really close look at the OSHA standard, and specifically the appendices covering methylene chloride. You might also know it as MC, or dichloromethane.
And our mission today really is to pull out the key stuff you need from these documents.
That's the goal. We want to give you a solid grasp of the hazards MC poses, what precautions are needed, the medical surveillance side of things, all tailored for your role in safety.
So what are we covering specifically?
Well, we'll start with how MC gets into the body, the immediate effects. Then we'll dig into the longer-term risks, like the cancer concerns, which are significant.
Okay.
We'll also break down medical surveillance, what's required, what's recommended, and how exposure monitoring fits in. It's about getting you actionable insights.
Great. Let's jump right in. First up, how does methylene chloride actually enter the body? The sources seem clear on this.
Yeah, overwhelmingly, it's inhalation. Breathing in the vapors. That's the main route we need to control.
And right away, that leads to some serious acute hazards.
Absolutely. Acute exposure acts as a central nervous system depressant.
Right.
And this isn't just feeling a bit tired.
Right.
It can range from subtle things like maybe impaired coordination or difficulty concentrating, which, around machinery is already dangerous,
Definitely.
all the way to narcosis, basically being knocked out. And in really high concentrations, it can, unfortunately, be fatal.
Wow. Okay, that's sobering. And the documents also mention cardiac toxicity. How does that work?
That's a really critical point. It's about how our bodies metabolize MC. One pathway in the liver, using the P450 oxidase system, it actually converts MC into carbon monoxide.
Into CO, the stuff we worry about from furnaces.
Exactly, that same carbon monoxide. And CO, as we know, binds really tightly to hemoglobin in the blood, much better than oxygen does. So it effectively reduces the blood's ability to carry oxygen. This puts a huge strain on the heart.
So it's especially dangerous for people with heart conditions.
Extremely dangerous. The standard specifically mentions the risk of triggering angina or even heart attacks in susceptible individuals. It's a major concern.
So it's like a double hit the MC affecting the brain directly, and then the body making CO that affects the heart.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's a crucial takeaway. And on top of that, the sources also mention irritation. Inhaling the vapors can irritate the respiratory passages and the eyes.
Okay. And you mentioned two metabolic pathways. One makes CO. What about the other one?
Right. The other pathway involves glutathione. Usually glutathione helps us detoxify, but with MC, this pathway can unfortunately lead to byproducts, like potentially formaldehyde, which have been linked to carcinogenic activity.
Ah, so that's the cancer connection.
That's a major part of it, yes. It's a key reason why OSHA and other agencies are so concerned about the cancer risk with MC.
What did the actual research find regarding that risk?
Well, the animal studies, particularly in rodents, are pretty compelling. Rats and mice exposed to MC through inhalation over long periods showed clear increases in certain tumors.
Like what kind of tumors?
We saw lung and liver tumors in mice and mammary tumors in female rats. These findings in animals are a really strong piece of the evidence puzzle.
Okay, clear in animals. But what about in people? Workers exposed on the job?
That's where OSHA uses the term suggestive evidence. Based on epidemiological studies looking at groups of workers, they concluded there's suggestive evidence of increased cancer risk in humans.
Suggestive, meaning not definitive proof, but enough to be worried.
Exactly. They feel the human evidence is consistent with the animal findings, which strengthens the overall concern. And SH calls it a potential occupational carcinogen. IRC says animal carcinogen.
And OSHA considers it?
OSHA considers it a suspected human carcinogen. So the consensus among regulatory bodies is, yes, this is a substance we need to treat as a potential cancer risk in humans.
Got it. Okay, so we've covered entry, immediate CNS and heart effects, and the long-term cancer worry. Let's talk symptoms. What if someone gets liquid MC on their skin?
Direct skin contact is bad news. It causes irritation, can lead to chemical burns, and importantly, MC can be absorbed through the skin.
So it gets into the bloodstream that way, too.
Yep, it adds to the overall body burden on top of whatever they might be inhaling. And eye contact, of course, is also very damaging. That's why PPE is not negotiable.
Makes sense. And if someone inhales high concentrations, what would we see?
The symptoms can escalate quickly. Nausea, vomiting, feeling lightheaded or dizzy, numbness or tingling in the limbs. You might see changes in liver enzymes, in blood tests. Breathing problems are common, potentially leading to bronchitis or even pulmonary edema fluid in the lungs. And like we said, severe exposure can cause unconsciousness and even death.
That's grim. What about lower levels, maybe exposure day after day?
Even at lower concentrations, you can still get irritation, skin, eyes, respiratory tract, headaches, nausea are common too. But a really insidious danger is the subtle impact on the central nervous system.
How so?
It can impair coordination, slow reaction time, affect alertness. Think about someone operating machinery or driving a forklift. That impairment can lead directly to accidents.
Right. They might not feel terribly sick, but they're not functioning safely.
Precisely. The standard does note that short-term, lower-level exposures probably don't cause permanent disability. But based on animal studies showing liver toxicity with chronic exposure, there's a concern for similar long-term liver effects in humans.
And always the background cancer risk with chronic exposure.
Always. It really drives home the need for consistent controls.
So given all this, what's the approach to medical surveillance? What should safety pros know?
Well, the surveillance strategy is directly tied to MC being a suspected carcinogen and a CNS depressant. Early detection of any neurological issues really depends on catching those signs of CNS depression during physical exams, looking for subtle changes.
And does the carbon monoxide aspect factor into surveillance?
It does. Since MC metabolism raises carboxyhemoglobin levels and workplace CO adds to that, monitoring those levels can be informative. It's not strictly required by the standard, but post-shift carboxyhemoglobin testing is recommended.
As an index of exposure.
Exactly. Especially useful if there are other CO sources. And while, current surveillance can't spot cancer at the very earliest stage, the hope is that regular checks and awareness, plus advances in treatment, improve outcomes if cancer does develop.
Now, Appendix B gets specific about the medical surveillance program. What's key in the medical and occupational history collection?
Getting a thorough history is absolutely vital. Annually, you need a detailed work history, what jobs, what tasks, potential exposure levels, and a comprehensive medical history. Big focus on cardiac history and any neurological symptoms.
Why the strong focus on cardiac history again?
Because of that MC to C to co-metabolism pathway, it puts direct stress on the heart. So we need to know if someone has pre-existing conditions that make them more vulnerable. Same logic for neurological symptoms, looking for early signs of CNS effects.
OSHA provides a sample questionnaire in Appendix B, right? What does that cover?
Yeah, it's a useful tool. It gathers demographics, then digs into occupational history, past jobs, current tasks, even hobbies that might involve MC exposure.
Hobbies too. Interesting.
Yeah, think furniture stripping or model building, potentially.
Yeah.
Then a detailed medical history. General health, respiratory, cardiovascular, liver, CNS, blood systems. Plus lifestyle factors like smoking, which matter for CO levels.
And it asks about specific symptoms like headaches or dizziness.
Right, things an employee might not automatically link to their work. It also stresses that the physician needs to understand the workplace conditions and be aware of any potential high exposure incidents. The questionnaire helps gather all that systematically.
Okay, moving to the physical exam itself. What are the main components?
The main goals are detecting pre-existing conditions that might increase risk and establishing a health baseline for future comparison. It involves assessing the nervous system, cardiovascular system, and lungs, the key targets for MC.
And evaluating fitness for respirator use is a big part.
Absolutely critical, especially for negative pressure respirators, which adds strain. The physician has to check if the employee's heart and lungs can handle that safely. They also check for things like facial hair that could prevent a good seal.
Right, the seal is everything.
Yeah.
And specific lung tests are needed for negative pressure respirator users.
Correct. FVC forced vital capacity and FEV1 forced expiratory volume in 1 second, plus the ratio between them. These need to be checked before first use and at least annually. Beyond that, the standard lists a pretty comprehensive physical: skin, eyes, chest, heart, abdomen, nervous system exam. Lab tests like hemoglobin, hematocrit, liver enzymes, ALT, ECG, and the pulmonary function tests are standard elements too.
Sounds thorough. Any other recommendations?
It mentions checking blood oxygen carrying capacity can be useful, especially after an acute exposure. And again, that recommendation for periodic end-of-shift carboxyhemoglobin testing, with suggested action levels 3% for non-smokers, 10% for smokers, that should trigger an investigation if exceeded.
Okay, let's talk responsibility. What must the employer provide to the physician?
The employer's job is to give the physician context. They need to provide a copy of the MC standard, describe the employee's job duties and potential exposures, list the PPE used, and share any previous relevant medical findings for that employee.
Makes sense. The doc needs the full picture. And what does the physician then need to provide back?
The physician provides a written statement to both the employee and the employer. It needs to cover several key things: their opinion on whether the employee has conditions increasing risk from MC or respirator use, any recommended restrictions on exposure or PPE use, confirmation if the employee is medically fit for the assigned respirator.
And informing the employee about risks.
Yes, crucially, they must inform the employee about the potential cancer risk and the heart disease risks from the CO effect. And they confirm to the employer that the employee has been informed of their results.
But not the specific medical details going to the employer.
Exactly. The opinion to the employer shouldn't contain unrelated confidential medical info. It's about occupational relevance while protecting privacy.
A careful balance. Now, the outline mentions another standard, 1926.60 for MDA. How does that fit in?
Right. MDA is 4-form-4-methylenedianiline. It's included mainly for context to show OSHA regulates many chemicals. That specific standard, 1926.60, applies to construction work involving MDA handling it, spills, transport on site.
So different chemical, different industry focus, different standard.
Precisely. It does not generally apply to methylene chloride work. It has its own rules, exemptions for low-content materials or finished articles, and record-keeping for those exemptions. Just important to know it exists, but our focus is MC today.
Okay, back to MC and Appendix A. What are the absolute key permissible exposure limits, the PLLs?
The big ones are the 8-hour time-weighted average, or TWA-PEL, which is 25 parts per million ppm.
Okay, 25 ppm average over a shift.
And then there's the short-term exposure limit, the STEL. That's 125 ppm averaged over just 15 minutes. You can't exceed that even if the 8-hour average is low. These are the legal lines in the sand.
Got it. And Appendix A repeats the health hazard info. Anything new or emphasized there?
It strongly reiterates the entry routes, inhalation, skyny contact, ingestion. It re-emphasizes the anesthetic effects of short-term exposure, confusion, nausea, headache, worsening angina.
And long-term?
Again, it points to the animal studies as the best evidence for carcinogenicity. Those lung liver tumors in mice, mammary tumors in rats.
How does it frame the human cancer evidence in Appendix A?
It acknowledges the suggestive human studies linking MC to biliary and brain cancers, but also notes other studies didn't find that link. So it explicitly states OSHA's view. The evidence suggests, but doesn't definitively prove, MC causes cancer in humans. It reflects that ongoing scientific discussion.
Okay. What about warning properties? Can people smell MC easily?
Unfortunately, no. The reported odor threshold when people can smell it varies wildly, from 25 ppm up to over 300 ppm. Some people might smell it below the PLL, others only way above.
So you absolutely cannot rely on smell.
Definitely not. Plus, olfactory fatigue is a big issue. People stop smelling it even when it's still there at dangerous levels. It has poor warning properties overall.
Which just hammers home the need for monitoring and controls. What about emergency first aid in Appendix A?
Standard stuff, but critical. Eyes. Flush with tons of water for 15 minutes minimum. Get medical help fast. No contacts. Skin. Wash thoroughly. Inhalation. Fresh air immediately. CPR if needed. Keep warm. Get medical help. And for rescuers, safety first. Know your procedures and equipment beforehand.
Good reminders. And PPE specifics from Appendix A respirators.
It stresses engineering controls first. But respirators are needed when controls aren't feasible, being installed, fail, for confined spaces, emergencies, and, crucially, only MSHA or NIOH-approved supplied air respirators are allowed for MC.
Not air purifying ones.
No, supplied air only. And you need a full written respiratory protection program, fit testing, training, the works.
And for skin and eye protection.
Impervious clothing, the right kind of gloves, face shields at least 8 inches long. If clothes get wet with liquid MC, off immediately, handle carefully for decontamination, and splash-proof goggles are a must if liquid contact is possible.
Housekeeping and hygiene recommendations.
Keep the workplace clean and orderly, have leak and spill detection programs, emergency showers and eye washes readily available, working, stocked with cleansers, and handle contaminated clothing properly in designated spots.
Okay, let's get into the safe use, handling, storage details from Appendix A fire hazards.
While not super flammable like some solvents, MC vapors can form flammable mixtures with air at higher temperatures. Know the limits in ignition temp. It's heavier than water, slightly soluble.
Reactivity. What should it be kept away from?
Heat, moisture, strong oxidizers, caustics like sodium hydroxide, and reactive metals powdered aluminum or magnesium, sodium, potassium. Also, be aware liquid MC attacks some plastics, rubber, and coatings. Material compatibility is key.
So choose storage tanks and pipes carefully.
Absolutely. The toxicity recap is there too. Irritant liquid, narcotic vapor, potential cancer, worsens heart disease via CO. Storage should be cool, dry, well ventilated, away from hazards. Use resistant containers, plain or galvanized steel often works. Inspect everything regularly.
What about electrical gear and firefighting?
Electrical equipment needs to be rated for Class CI hazardous locations if vapors could be present. For fires, expect toxic fumes, so SCBA is essential for firefighters. Use water spray to cool containers. Use appropriate extinguishers.
Spills and waste.
Small spills might evaporate safely if well ventilated. Large ones usually need containment, absorption, and then incineration, often with scrubbers to handle acid gases. Watch out for phosgene if it burns.
And basic rules like no eating or smoking.
Absolutely forbidden in regulated areas above the PELs. Also, no portable heaters in confined spaces where vapors could build up. And always, workers should ask supervisors about the specific safety rules for their tasks with MC.
Appendix A also touches on the medical requirements again.
Yes, it reiterates the triggers for offering medical surveillance. Exposure at above the action level, 12.5 ppm TWA for 30 days year, or above the PELs for 10 days year, and the need for physician clearance for respirator use above the PELs. And again, it must be at no cost to the employee.
How about monitoring procedures in Appendix A? How should exposure be measured?
The gold standard is full shift consecutive breathing zone samples. Collect air right where the worker breathes, all shift long. Acceptable methods include charcoal tubes with lab analysis, real-time monitors, passive dosimeters.
As long as they're accurate enough.
Exactly. They must meet OSHA's accuracy requirements. Plus, MIDI is 25% accuracy at or above the PEL. Plus, MIDI is 35% below it, with 95% confidence. The employer has to pick a valid method. OSHA Method 80 is given as one example.
And who should do the monitoring?
It has to be done by a technically qualified person, someone with industrial hygiene expertise.
Employees have rights regarding monitoring too, right?
Yes, absolutely. Appendix A restates their right, or the representative's right, to observe the monitoring and get the results. The employer has to provide any needed PPE for observers too. Transparency is key.
And what about general access to information?
Employers must provide Appendix A info, training on safe work practices, emergency procedures, and PPE use. Workers have the right to see monitoring results and know about corrective actions. Records, exposure, and medical must be kept 30 years and accessible to employees. And labels and SDSs are required for materials over 0.1% MC with clear hazard warnings.
The last part of Appendix A gives practical examples.
Yeah, it lists common operations like paint stripping, aerosols, degreasing, refrigerant use. And for each, it suggests effective controls, ventilation, enclosure, PPE, maybe substitution with a safer chemical. It helps connect the dots between the rules and real-world work.
Okay, this has been incredibly detailed. Pulling it all together for the safety professionals, the risk managers listening, what are the absolute critical takeaways?
I'd say methylene chloride is seriously hazardous, short-term CNS and heart risks, long-term cancer concern. It has poor warning properties. You cannot rely on smell. Rigorous exposure monitoring and strong engineering controls are essential.
MPPE.
Where needed, only supplied air respirators are acceptable, along with proper skin and eye protection. Comprehensive medical surveillance is vital for early detection. And following the OSHA standard PLs, monitoring safe handling isn't just compliance, it's fundamental worker protection.
And for our listeners, understanding these details really is core to your job ensuring a safe workplace. Having this kind of distilled information, hopefully, is a valuable tool for your risk assessments, program development, and training.
Definitely. I'd really encourage listeners to review the full OSHA standard, 1910.1052, and maybe glance at 1926.60 on MBA, just for context. Always check the specific SDSs for products you use. Think hard about how this applies to your site and stay proactive.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Given the known risks and the suggestive nature of some human data for chemicals like MC, how are you ensuring your safety programs aren't just checking boxes, but are truly dynamic and evolving with the science to provide the highest level of protection?
That constant evaluation is key.
This deep dive into methylene chloride was presented by Safety One Source.